The Las Vegas shooting, inside the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. The night sky over Las Vegas glowed with flashing lights, and music filled the air. Thousands of people were laughing, singing, and dancing at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. Then, without warning, the joyful sounds turned into screams. A loud, sharp crack echoed across the open field. Then another, and another. People froze at first. Some thought it was fireworks, but the popping sounds kept coming, faster and louder. Within seconds, the crowd scattered in all directions. Panic took over. People fell to the ground, others crouched behind food stands, and some used their bodies to shield loved ones. The bullets didn't stop. It sounded endless, like a storm of metal raining down. From above, invisible and distant, someone was firing into the sea of people, and no one knew why. Police officers shouted for everyone to take cover as they tried to locate where the shots were coming from. The music stage lights flashed across terrified faces. A young woman cried, "Please, somebody help us!" Her hands shook as she held her injured friend, blood spreading across the ground. The sound of gunfire echoed off nearby buildings, making it hard to tell where it was coming from. Some ran toward safety, others froze in shock. Somewhere in the chaos, a police radio crackled. "We have an active shooter, possibly from the Mandalay Bay Hotel." Inside a suite on the 32nd floor of that hotel, the shooter, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, stood by a broken window with 2 rifles beside him. He looked down at the crowd through the scope of his weapon. Paddock had planned this moment carefully. He had lined up over 20 guns inside the room and set up cameras in the hallway to warn him if anyone approached. As he reloaded, flashes of light reflected off the hotel walls. Below, chaos grew. Ambulances struggled to reach the wounded. Officers sprinted toward the hotel, unsure how many shooters there were or what they might face. The city, known for bright lights and laughter, had turned into a nightmare in minutes. And just as suddenly as it began, the gunfire stopped. Silence fell over the scene, broken only by the cries of the injured. What no one knew yet was that the man behind the gunfire had sealed himself inside that hotel room. Hours earlier, before the horror began, Las Vegas was glowing like always. The city buzzed with life, tourists filled the streets, taxis honked, and the air smelled of food from nearby restaurants. Stephen Paddock had checked into the Mandalay Bay Hotel days before the shooting. He looked like any other guest, quiet, polite, and calm. No one suspected what he was planning. He brought several large bags into his suite, and no one questioned it. He even ordered room service and tipped well. The staff described him as normal. That evening, families, couples, and friends gathered for the final night of the country music festival. The air was warm, and laughter echoed as the crowd waited for the main performer, Jason Aldean, to take the stage. People waved their phones in the air, recording the concert, completely unaware that danger was sitting high above them. As the first songs played, the energy was electric. People danced and sang together. Nearby, a father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders so she could see the stage. Others clapped along to the beat, soaking in the last moments of what should have been a perfect night. Meanwhile, Paddock was in his hotel room, assembling his rifles and setting up his cameras. He placed one near the peephole and another on a cart outside the door to watch the hallway. From his window, he could see everything below, the bright lights of the stage, the crowds, the laughter. It was a full, living scene of joy, and he was as about to destroy it. He checked his weapons again, his movements calm and deliberate. Outside, no one could imagine that death was waiting 32 floors above them. At 10:05 p.m., the first shot rang out. Panic rippled through the crowd. Within seconds, the shooting intensified, echoing through the entire Las Vegas Strip. People dropped to the ground crying, praying, and screaming. Officers radioed for backup, and SWAT teams began rushing toward the hotel. The shooter was using rifles fitted with bump stocks, devices that made the guns fire almost like machine guns. The rounds tore through the air faster than anyone could react. It felt endless. Suddenly, amid the chaos, the gunfire stopped. For a moment, people thought it was over. A woman whispered, "Is it safe to get up?" But before she could move, the sound of rapid gunfire returned, louder, faster, closer. People began running again, stumbling over fences and dropped belongings. Police officers pushed forward, heading straight into the danger zone. The gunfire seemed to come from the upper floors of Mandalay Bay, but which window? Which room? No one knew yet. The lights of the strip flickered against the black sky, flashing red and blue from the emergency vehicles below. Inside the hotel, 2 security guards moved cautiously toward Paddock's floor. One of them, Jesus Campus, approached the door and was suddenly hit by a bullet through it. He fell to the ground, bleeding, and radioed for help. That was the moment police confirmed the shooter's exact location. SWAT officers surrounded the 32nd floor, preparing to breach the room. Heartbeats pounded in their ears as they moved down the quiet hallway. Behind that door, the man who had caused the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history waited, alone, silent, and ready. And just as the SWAT team prepared to break down the door, another shot rang out from inside. The sound of that single gunshot echoed through the hotel hallway like thunder. For a moment, everything went still. The SWAT officers froze, their weapons raised, unsure if the shooter had fired at them or at himself. Then came silence. The only sound left was the steady hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of sirens below. "We have one more shot from inside the suspect's room," the team leader whispered into his radio. No movement detected. Seconds felt like hours. Officers moved carefully down the hall, their boots pressing softly into the carpet. The smell of gunpowder still hung faintly in the air. When they reached the suite, they placed a small explosive charge on the door. 3, 2, 1, breach! The blast shook the corridor, and the door flew open. The officers rushed inside, guns up, ready for anything. But what they found stopped them in their tracks. Stephen Paddock was lying on the floor, motionless, surrounded by dozens of shell casings and rifles. A pool of blood spread slowly beneath him. The man who had caused so much death and panic had taken his own life. His last shot had been aimed at himself. Around the room, officers found piles of weapons, 23 guns in total, along with scopes, high-capacity magazines, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. The carpet was littered with empty bullet shells, and the walls were scarred from the recoil of his powerful weapons. On the table nearby were detailed notes showing the distance and angles from his window to the concert below. It was clear he had planned this with precision. Down below, the scene was still chaotic. Police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks crowded the streets. Medics worked desperately to treat the wounded. Some victims lay on the pavement, others were carried away on stretchers. Volunteers and strangers helped one another, using belts and shirts to stop bleeding. The ground was covered with spilled drinks, lost shoes, and cell phones flashing with unanswered calls. A woman sat beside her injured husband, whispering, "Please stay with me," over and over. A few steps away, a young man looked up at the hotel window where the shots had come from, his face pale with disbelief. By 11:20 p.m., the shooting had officially stopped, but the fear still lingered. The police cleared nearby hotels, unsure if Paddock had acted alone. Rumors spread quickly. Some said there were multiple shooters. Others believed explosives were planted nearby. The strip was locked down, and the usually bright city fell eerily quiet. Helicopters hovered above, shining spotlights on the area. Officers moved through the streets with flashlights, calling out for anyone injured or hiding. Back in the Mandalay Bay, detectives began piecing together what had just happened. They searched every corner of Paddock's suite and found cameras he had installed to monitor the hallway. There were even tripods aimed at the concert grounds. On one of the tables sat his computer, but it had no note, no message, no explanation. The question everyone asked, the one that would haunt investigators for years, was why? Why had a retired accountant and quiet man from Nevada done this? As news of the massacre spread, panic rippled through the country. Television stations broke into programming with live coverage. "Breaking news, mass shooting in Las Vegas," the headlines read. Families across America watched in horror as footage played of concert-goers running, screaming, and ducking for cover. Reporters spoke to witnesses who described the sound of bullets as never-ending. One man, still shaking, told cameras, "It sounded like war. People were dropping everywhere." Hospitals across Las Vegas filled to capacity. Doctors and nurses worked through the night, treating victims with gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, and broken bones. Blood donations poured in from people waiting in long lines outside medical centers. The entire city came together, even as grief hung heavy over everyone. The next morning, October 2nd, the sun rose over a city that didn't feel like Las Vegas anymore. The usually buzzed strip was silent. Flags were lowered to half-staff. The death toll had reached 58, with hundreds more injured. At the Mandalay Bay, yellow tape blocked off the entrance. Police and FBI agents filled the building, collecting evidence and photographing every detail of Paddock's room. Investigators soon discovered he had checked in days earlier, using the service elevator to carry in his weapons unnoticed. He had booked 2 connecting suites, giving him more space to move and fire. They found drills and tools that suggested he had tried to break into another room, and stacks of ammunition that showed he had been ready for a much longer attack. His car, parked in the hotel garage, contained even more explosives and bullets. As the details became public, the horror only deepened. People couldn't understand how one man had managed to cause so much destruction. There were no signs of anger, no political ties, no warning. His girlfriend, who was overseas at the time, told investigators she had no idea he was planning something so terrible. The mystery of his motive became one of the most troubling parts of the case. That night, Las Vegas held its first vigil. Thousands gathered near the "Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas" sign, lighting candles for the victims. The glow of the candles flickered in the desert wind as people prayed, cried, and embraced each other. Flowers and photos were placed on the ground. A local singer quietly played his guitar, performing one of the songs that had been playing when the shooting began. But while the city mourned, investigators were still working. The FBI scoured Paddock's home in Mesquite, Nevada. Inside, they found more guns, ammunition, and computers filled with internet searches about police tactics, open-air concerts, and ballistic calculations. He had spent months planning, testing, and preparing. Yet even with all this evidence, no note, video, or message revealed why. And then, just as investigators thought they had gathered everything, they found something strange. Hidden behind one of the hotel room's curtains was a small black notebook. Its pages were filled with numbers, scribbles, and odd symbols that made no immediate sense. It wasn't a confession, but it might have been a clue. The notebook sat on the evidence table under bright lights. Investigators leaned over it, flipping carefully through each page. Every line was covered with handwritten numbers, angles, and short notes. It wasn't a diary. It was more like calculations. Phrases like distance to target, wind direction, and bullet drop appeared over and over. It showed how carefully Stephen Paddock had planned his attack. Each number represented a test, a measurement, a step closer to the deadly accuracy he unleashed that night. But what shocked investigators most was that none of it explained why. There were no hateful words, no political messages, no sign of mental illness written in those pages. He had simply planned every technical detail of mass murder, but left out any clue to his motive. The FBI would later describe it as one of the most mysterious crimes in modern U.S. history. Outside, Las Vegas was still trying to heal. The once busy festival grounds had turned into a silent field covered in flowers, crosses, and pictures of smiling faces, lives lost too soon. Families came every day, holding each other tightly as they looked at the spot where their loved ones had stood. The city, famous for its energy and lights, was now filled with grief. Reporters from around the world filled the streets, and police held daily press conferences. Sheriff Joe Lombardo, leading the investigation, confirmed that Paddock had acted alone. "We have no evidence of any accomplice," he said firmly. Still, rumors continued to swirl. Some believed he had help, others thought he had snapped suddenly. But every lead ended the same way, with no clear reason. The FBI searched Paddock's background, his bank accounts, his health, even his past relationships. He was wealthy, retired, and had no criminal record. He had even gambled regularly in Las Vegas casinos, often staying in the same hotel where he would later carry out the attack. In the weeks that followed, heroes from that terrible night began to emerge. Ordinary people who had risked their lives to save others. One man carried more than a dozen strangers to safety in his truck. A nurse from California stayed behind, helping the wounded while bullets flew overhead. Off-duty police officers shielded others with their bodies. Their courage became the light in the darkness. Meanwhile, the debate over gun control grew louder across the country. Lawmakers argued over how one man had managed to buy so many weapons and attach devices that turned them into near-automatic rifles. The bump stocks he used were soon banned nationwide. But for the victims' families, no law could undo the pain. They wanted answers, something to make sense of what had happened, but there were none to give. Months later, the FBI released its final report. It stated what many already knew. Stephen Paddock acted alone, planned alone, and died alone. His motive remained unknown. For the victims, it was the hardest truth to accept, that they would never know why it happened. The man who had caused so much pain had left the world without a single word of explanation. Yet from the tragedy came unity. The city of Las Vegas built the Community Healing Garden, a peaceful place filled with flowers, trees, and messages of hope. Each victim's name was engraved on a stone, surrounded by lights that glowed softly at night. Tourists and locals visited daily, leaving notes that read, "Vegas strong," and "You are not forgotten." It became a symbol of love overcoming hate and strength rising from loss. As the first anniversary approached, survivors gathered once more. The crowd was smaller, quieter, and filled with tears. Jason Aldean, the singer who had been performing during the shooting, returned to Las Vegas to pay his respects. He stood silently as candles flickered in the warm desert wind. Families held photos close to their hearts. Some whispered prayers, others stood in silence, staring at the night sky that had once rained bullets. The pain never fully went away, but neither did the courage of those who survived. Stories continued to surface, of strangers helping strangers, of doctors working through exhaustion, of officers running toward danger instead of away. These were the moments that reminded everyone that even in the darkest night, humanity can shine. Today, the site of the Route 91 Harvest Festival stands quiet, fenced off as a permanent reminder of what happened. Plans have been made to turn it into a memorial, a place where future generations can come to remember not just the tragedy, but the strength of those who faced it. The Mandalay Bay windows have long been replaced. The streets have returned to life, but the memory of that night will never fade. Las Vegas, the city of lights, now carries a shadow, but also a story of survival. Every year, on October the 1st, the lights along the Strip dim for 58 seconds, one for each life lost. And as the glow returns, it reminds the world that even in the face of the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, love, courage, and unity will always rise again.